Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Saka. Iran's Islamic government is under enormous pressure, both in its role as regional power confronting Israel and in terms of its internal stability. On the home front, there is no sign of a let-up in the confrontation between the Iranian internal security apparatus and those women in the country demanding life and freedom and an end to what some UN officials have termed gender apartheid. My guest today is Masoumeh Ebtekar, a former vice president in Iran for women and family affairs. Amid social and economic unrest, is today's Iranian leadership in danger of losing its grip? Masoumeh Ebtekar in Tehran, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
Madam Ebtekar, as a former vice president for women in Iran, are you ashamed of what the Iranian state is doing to your country's women today?
Well, first of all, you painted a very grim picture of my country, as many Western media they've been doing that for years and years now about Iran. We do have challenges, and we had a major challenge in terms of dealing with our young people, and particularly our women, a couple of years ago. And that was due to the issue of the hijab and the fact that our younger generation has questions about their lifestyle, about their independence, about their freedom to choose their lifestyle. But things are improving. We've had a presidential election, and President Pezeshkian, who is a academician, he's a surgeon, he's a very forward-looking person. He's been elected, and he has promised to bring about change in many different areas.
Yeah, you say things are changing and giving me the positive case, but surely if you are particularly a young Iranian woman today, you are in grave danger of falling foul of the extremely heavy-handed morality police. Let us look at one particular case from just a few days ago, that of Ahu Daryai. Now, she, as you know, was on the campus of Tehran's Islamic Azad University. Her supporters say that she was approached by the morality police. They were violent with her. They tried to rip at her clothing, to pull her clothing, because they said that she was not properly displaying hijab. She was so angered by this, she ripped her clothes off down to her underwear. She was then, quote unquote, disappeared by the police. Isn't this the reality for many young women in Iran today?
No, you can't make a generalization. We had a case, that case has been under scrutiny by a lot of women activists and by the civil society. They're following the issue, but you can't make a generalization out of that case. You have many similar cases in even the so-called liberal societies in Europe.
Well, with respect, Madam Ebtekar, you don't have cases where women are approached by the police who use violent tactics, claiming that they are not properly dressed in Western societies.
Yeah, we have those challenges, as I explained, and that was one of the promises that the president brought about, was to alleviate some of those pressures, and he has been to a great extent successful. I think that the situation is changing, is improving, and I think that there's a lot of hope now because we have more and more women in the government. We have a woman appointed as a minister. We have several vice presidents appointed. So the social situation is gradually. It's not that everything is resolved.
Okay, but I mean,
it's gradually improving. And you see a lot of violence on behalf of the police in Europe today. against protesters for being anti-Semitic. Whoever is protesting against the illegal occupation of Palestine by the Zionist regime and the ongoing genocide is now labeled as an anti-Semit and is attacked, and you see the police.
I don't want to address those allegations you've just made about what is happening elsewhere. This is a very important interview to discuss what's happening inside your own country, and as you are a former Vice President for Women's Affairs, I think it is reasonable that we push you on what is actually happening and what has happened over the past 2 years and more since the killing in police custody of Mahsa Amini. Because if you look at the data collected by Amnesty International, they have concluded, quote, victims, survivors and their relatives continue to be denied truth, justice and reparation for crimes under international law in the 2 years since Mahsa Amini's killing and the uprising of particularly women inside your country. Amnesty go on to say that for the past 2 years, the authorities have been waging a propaganda campaign of denial and distortion to conceal evidence of their state crimes and their attempts to intimidate survivors and victims' families. Is that not what you are doing with me today?
Listen, I personally have criticized a lot of the policies. I personally have stood firmly in criticizing a lot of the policies that were taken during the previous years. I criticized the actions of the morality police, and I think that one of the reasons why Dr. Pezeshkian was elected by a majority of Iranian voters, those who were eligible to vote, 50% of them voted in this recent election, and a majority voted for change. One of those reasons was that we have change in many of these policies, in many of these different dimensions. We have different factions in Iran. Everyone does not agree with the policies that, for example, the morality police has put forward in these years. There are different political viewpoints on these issues. So it's not that these policies are being pursued and there's no criticism, there's no appeasement.
No, understood. If I may, you make a very interesting point, but isn't one thing we are seeing in Iran today that the new president, Mr. Pezeshkian, as you say, is defined within Iranian politics as something of a moderate, certainly a man who's expressed his own opinion that the morality police should, quote unquote, no longer bother women so publicly over this issue of how they wear the hijab or the headscarf. He has said that, yes, but the reality on the ground is that the morality police don't seem to be listening to their own new president. And indeed, what we've seen in the last couple of months is the final implementation, the passage through all of its legislative phases of a new so-called chastity and hijab law, which now mandate the state to impose a 10-year penalty, a 10-year imprisonment on women who violate the hijab law.
Well, first of all, the law has not been yet implemented. The president has asked for a revision of this law. The government has officially asked the parliament to revise the law. So it's not yet implemented at all. The president and the current government do not agree, do not go along with the lines of this law. There's a lot of criticism in the media, in the civil society. So this is not something that's finished. And of course, as long as this president and this government is in place, I don't think that this law will be implemented. I hope that the different actions, which is civil society particularly, the women activists are taking, will prevent this law from being implemented.
Well, that's fascinating.
And also, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope that things will improve, have improved in these recent months, and will continue to improve, not only in terms of the issue of the hijab and the covering, but also in terms of gender equity, in terms of the role of women in different aspects of society. Iranian women are very now well educated. in terms of academic education, in terms of different fields, different skills. You see many women, more than 30% of our physicians, medical doctors are women now in Iran.
If I may interrupt for just a moment, Madam Ebtekar, if I am understanding you...
Let me finish what I'm trying to say.
Well, no, but what you're saying different things which are fascinating. I just want to start with this basic question to you. If I'm understanding you correctly, you seem to be actually expressing support for the women's movement in Iran, which is insisting that it will no longer accept what many Iranians call, quote unquote, gender apartheid. Are you on their side?
To use this word gender apartheid, you have to look back and see what it means. In a country where women have been in the government, women have been in the academic sphere, women have been in the social sphere, they have economic freedoms, they are a very vocal part of the media where we see women everywhere. It's not correct to use the word gender apartheid. I think that we need to move towards more equity on different areas. Yes, we need to work, and we have programs. When I was the vice president, we had a very active program being implemented under the theme of gender equity in different spheres, such as education, such as health, such as employment. And we had different programs with different ministries to improve the status of women in all these different areas. And Iranian women are moving ahead. And it's very difficult to stop them in this regard. They've been moving in sports. You see that women in international games, they're getting more and more medals.
Let me ask a question, if I may. Let's take the young women of Iran today. So many of them are either taking to the streets, or if they're too scared to take to the streets because of repression, they are certainly in their private lives and online expressing support for this uprising we've seen over the past 2 years. Just be clear with me, do you support it?
The uprising has, that was a couple months in about 2 years ago. Now the situation has changed considerably.
Yeah, with respect, that's because women and men have been killed. Many hundreds have been locked up. There is a great fear now of taking to the streets in that way. But that doesn't mean the sentiment has changed.
It does mean the sentiment has changed because we've had elections. We've had free nationwide elections in this country. And, well, initially there was a lot of I think a lot of the protesters or those who were criticizing the government, they decided not to take part in these elections. But gradually, as Dr. Pezeshkian was approved by the Guardians Council, and as the reformist parties came into the scene, gradually more and more people decided to take part in these elections. These elections have changed the general social and political atmosphere in Iran.
All right, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the atmosphere, as you put it. And actually, let me start with a thought about geopolitics. I mean, you've made it clear you're a supporter of President Pezeshkian. How do you feel that Pezeshkian is coping with the current situation in which Israel is applying massive asymmetric force against Iran's allies / proxy forces in Gaza, Hamas, in Lebanon, Hezbollah, in Yemen, the Houthis, in Syria as well? It looks to many people outside Iran as though Iran is under enormous pressure and Pezeshkian doesn't really know how to handle it.
I think that Dr. Pezeshkian, our president, has a well-versed team, both in terms of foreign diplomacy, but also in terms of the economic challenges, the sanctions that are being implemented against our country. I think that there is a strong team now in place. and they're working to be able to improve the economic situation in the country. They're working to be able to neutralize the effects of the sanctions, the unilateral, illegal sanctions against our country, which have been waged against our economy now for decades.
But if I may, President Pezeshkian came to power saying he would do all in his power to alleviate the pressure of sanctions. What we see with the election of Donald Trump in the United States, his return to power in January, is that he, it seems, is determined to reimpose what he calls, quote unquote, maximum pressure and maximum sanctions on Iran, which is going to stop Iran's oil exports in their tracks. So you've got a difficult economic situation now. It seems it's about to get much worse.
We have a difficult economic situation, that's true, but there are also hopes in terms of the diplomatic efforts that we've had with our neighbors, improving our economic and political relationships with our neighbors. That has been quite helpful. Iran is now part of important regional and international alliances such as the BRICS, and we hope that there would be new openings for Iran. It's not yet clear how the president-elect will deal with Iran, President-elect Trump. He's spoken about the need for peace. That is what he claims. He claims that he's not a president that wants to wage wars. This is hopeful, and we hope that keeping our dignity, considering the fact that the world knows that Iran has the necessary means to defend itself, we hope that we could move along with negotiations, maybe a new JCPOA deal, keeping Iran's stance, dignity, the right of the Iranian nation to have access to means of defense, to nuclear technologies. These are issues which Iran has been negotiating for many years now.
With respect, how hang on again, let me ask a question. You just said you have hopes that President Pezeshkian could oversee a renewal of the JCPO, that is the nuclear agreement with the Western powers, including the United States. Donald Trump is adamant that he won't go into that deal. He, after all, is the guy that walked away from that deal. But he also is the guy who points out that as long as Iran officially declares the United States to be the great Satan, then Iran has to be regarded as a dangerous enemy. So are you saying to me that President Pezeshkian might move away from that mindset in Iran, which depicts America as the great Satan?
I'm saying that the important point is that we have to wait and see in practice what policy President-elect Trump will follow. I think that it's possible that they will engage in a new JCPOA deal with different terms. But of course, keeping each party has to have its own share of the deal, and we look forward to the possibility of negotiations on the basis of respect, not on the basis of maximum pressure, because I think that President-elect Trump and his team, they realized that the maximum pressure policy had no avail. There was no ultimate reason to continue the maximum pressure policy after they saw that Iran is resisting and there's no result that they expected, they intended.
Madam Ebtekar,
I think that there might be a change. I think that there might be a change in the policy in the second term that President Trump has. I have to say, forgive me for the interruption. I have to say, I find this conversation with you very interesting because I think it's fair to say, even in the course of this interview, you've revealed to yourself to be still, as you've long been, a relative, quote-unquote, moderate within the Iranian political scene. So in that spirit,
And given your own history, because let us not forget, you as a student leader were one of the most high-profile students involved in the occupation of the US Embassy back in 1979 and 1980. You became a spokesman for those radical students who held US diplomats.
Spokeswoman.
Yes, and the point was you justified the violation of international law which that occupation and holding hostage diplomats represented. Would it, in the spirit that you are presenting to me of change, would it be time for you to apologize for that?
The taking of the American embassy in 1979 was done by about 400 students from Tehran. And actually, I didn't take part in that initial takeover. I joined the students about 3 days later. But the students did that in response to the admission of the deposed Shah and the possibility of a second coup d'etat in Iran. We have a history of foreign intervention in our country. And that sets the stage for the fact that the students believed that this might be repeated again. So they took action in respect of the fact that we had a coup d'etat.
I do not doubt you had your reasons. I just wonder whether, in your desire to see change, whether...
To understand that, exactly. But after those initial years, Iran has emerged as a very strong country in face of all the sanctions, in face of all the pressures. Iran has changed during all those years to emerge as an independent and effective player in this region. And for many instances, Iran has tried to alleviate those tensions, has tried to work with the world. We agreed and entered the JCPOA was just one instance. Iran entered the JCPOA and negotiated with all the different partners, including the Americans, and the Americans actually pulled out of the JCPOA.
All right, let me end, if I may, Madam Ebtekar. We're almost out of time. I want to end with the words of Taghi Rahmani, the husband of the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Narges Mohammadi, who, as you know, is still imprisoned inside Iran for her political activities. He says this, he said it to me in a recent interview. He said, the Islamic regime cannot continue. It is in crisis. I believe the Islamic Republic is living on borrowed time because it has no successful development plan for Iran. Do you think he could just be right?
I think that, as I mentioned, many of those who were imprisoned for political reasons have been released recently. Many women and men have been released recently due to the different follow-up actions of the government and President Pezeshkian. Many of the university professors who were taken out of the universities previously, they've returned back. Many of the students have returned back. So there's a lot of reasons for optimism and hope in Iran.
Let's let that be the last word. Masoumeh Ebtekar, I thank you very much for joining me from Tehran. Thank you.
Thank you as well.